talking about this. We were talking about, we really just established, in the first part, we established sort of what was in the atmosphere and what all the different chemicals, substances are in the atmosphere. And then in our second segment, whoa, there's someone's phone number. Yeah. We talked about how much carbon is actually held in different parts of the atmosphere, lithosphere, and hydrosphere. And we established that there's a bunch load of carbon out there, and let's just do 850 gigatons of carbon in the atmosphere, well, 40,900 gigatons in the ocean, most of that being in the deep ocean that doesn't exchange with the atmosphere. And then you have the land, which our chapter breaks up into land that is and is not in a state of permafrost, because the carbon that's held in the permafrost is kind of a wild card as we warm up. That's something that we worry about. Oh, move and move. That's from a different system. Okay, so what about it? Well, let me remind myself where I was when we were talking. So, all right, so the we've established what there is, but also these arrows are a good place to start. These indicate that there's exchange between these areas. And just to give you some idea of what goes back and forth, actually, it might be better to do it this way. No, this way. So I'm going to just do, I'm going to simplify. Our thing is that all of these things exchange carbon with each other is another thing that we have to be aware of. And I know this isn't, the most exciting part of this, but we have to establish the balance. And so, for example, between the land and the atmosphere, we're putting out about, what is it? Oh, God, just looking at it, that's bad. About 120 gigatons of carbon come from the land into the atmosphere every day. Now, how does that happen generally when we're talking about that? Like without thinking about combustion and fossil fuels and stuff like that. Like generally, how does carbon get into the atmosphere from the land?
Respiration.
Yeah, way to dig deep. Yes, that is it. Yeah, cellular respiration. So, I mean, there are other processes. There's decay and there's other things, but generally we think about cellular respiration and this is going to get a little crowded. Now maybe this isn't such a good idea, but it's too late for second guessing now. It's the way it is. And so, yeah, cellular respiration. And in which, those of you that do not remember, we burn the sugar, let's say. I mean, we burn a lot of things, but we always talk about it in terms of sugar because that's sort of the next to last step. All of the other things we eat get converted into pyruvate or one of the other G3P predecessors to the citric acid cycle. But anyway, they all go into respiration. We just say glucose, C6H12O6 plus O2 gives us CO2 and H2O. That is the process by which we burn our food. Yes?
What's that say when you plant?
Sorry, permafrost.
Okay.
PF, sorry, yeah.
And what, is that 700?
1700, yeah. 1700. And so respiration, burning our sugar, exhaling our carbon dioxide in our breath, and those sorts of things, they put 120 gigatons of carbon back in the atmosphere. And, well, that process goes the other direction also. And it turns out that in the natural balance of things, 120 gigatons also goes back from the atmosphere to the land. Guess how? Bless you. Plants, yeah, the photosynthesis, right? So the opposite process.
And this is CO2, not just carbon.
Yes, that says photosynthesis. Crap. Oh man, I should have done this up here. And that's the opposite, right? And when plants take the carbon dioxide from the air, they add it to water. Oops, H2O, and they make sugar. All right. So that's roughly in balance, right? And that's but we'll get into that. This is sort of the big picture, the long-term picture, and then the let's see. And then, of course, you have similar processes happening in the ocean, right? There's living things in the ocean, and so I'm not going to write the same equations because there's no need. But going back and forth between the mixed layer of the ocean and the atmosphere, we're exchanging about 80 gigatons. I think it's about 100 goes back and forth between the deep. Although I may have to come back and revise that. So, so the deep ocean, there is an exchange that goes back and forth between the mixed layer and the deep ocean as well. It's and that's the interesting thing is that happens with temperature as well. So temperature affects the mixed layer, and then it takes much longer to affect the deeper layer because it's just much more massive now. So here's something interesting, and when I say interesting, you know, interesting, I mean interesting to me. Between the atmosphere and rock. $460,000 years. So a carbon atom that ends up in the rock is going to be there for a while. Or it could take a while for it to get into the rock. Actually, once it's in the rock, it's there for millions of years.